So today I figured we'd talk about deal analysis. Once you got your marketing out there and you've got the phone starting to ring and you're meeting with people or you're evaluating properties that are kind of coming in from your sphere of influence, how do you analyze the deal? And we talk a lot about cash flow and achieving freedom through cash flow. So how does the Mandrell company, how does Willie Mandrell start off his deal analysis? What does that process look like, and how long does it generally take you per deal?
That's a good question. So that's actually good timing. I actually got a deal that came to me just yesterday, and kind of went through this process, and it evolves, and you get it changes a little bit as you have been in the business for a little while, as you start to learn your market, as you start to master your particular niche. But I think initially, it's all about income and expenses. That's all this business is. It's a cash flow business. It's all about income and expenses. So you start to first evaluate your income. I'll go to, if I was brand new to a market, I would use a service like rentalmeter.com and just see what the average rentals are for that particular building, or that, let's say I'm buying a 3-family. What's the bedroom count in each of the units? The deal I was particularly looking at specifically yesterday was it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom. So I'm adding up my rents, and I'm basically saying, what is my ideal tenant? Who's going to potentially live here? And what are they most likely going to be paying for that particular unit? So you can find out specifics like a site like rentalmeter.com. You can Google City of Boston housing statistics, or whatever, like city you happen to be in. There's also the fair housing for the federal level for HUD, the Health and Human. What does the HUD stand for? Is it Health and Human Services Department, or I can't remember?
HUD itself?
Yeah, HUD itself.
Housing and Urban Development.
Housing and Urban Development. My wife's in Health and Human Services, so I'm always getting the HUD website. You can look at statistics there. And just find out what is your potential income, right? I mean, I do a conservative number, I do a most likely number, and then an aggressive number. Find out what that number is, and then you're just looking at expenses. You're looking at, what am I putting down as a down payment? Do I have to raise 20 or 25% or whatever it may be? What is my mortgage payment going to be? What are my taxes going to be? A lot of times you can find these right through your real estate broker or your MLS sheet. What other expenses are there? Is it trash? Is it water? Am I paying for utilities? Adding up all those expenses and just basically first seeing, does the property perform well in a perfect scenario, right? Does your income exceed your expenses by a number that's, that you would consider successful? Right. I think that's where I would start to begin with.
No, it's honestly great. I mean, taking a bit of a market evaluation kind of piece of it and saying, okay, where is this property located? Where is, who is the tenant in this area? And, understanding what is currently existing in the asset as far as income is concerned, and then thinking, okay, what can I get from it if I change rents? A lot of the buildings that we generally will target are certainly ones that need more work. So I think that's probably one thing that lays into my fundamental thought process right off the bat, which is, okay, I have a general idea of what this property would, based on the areas we target, I have a general idea of what this asset would be valued at on an acquisition basis. And I understand, generally speaking, right, who, like you said, you determine who the actual tenant's going to be and what those rental rates are. And then my mind automatically goes to, what kind of condition is this thing in? Am I going to be dealing with just a maintenance nightmare? How old are the systems, roof, building envelope, windows, the things that tenants will generally complain about. I don't want to say complain, but have issues with a lot. And that's usually, tenants will generally start complaining more about things breaking down. So, or clogs. How old is the plumbing system? How old are the tubs that are in the place? Is the plumbing 90 years old and it clogs easily because it just, it just does, because it's not the way they design them today. So, I start thinking of, okay, well, how much do I really need to put into this building in order to just clean it up and rent it out. Because that always adds to kind of your acquisition price, cash out of pocket, maybe capital you may have to raise, which affects, generally speaking, if you're using, again, now when I generally look at stuff, if you're using private investors to help do acquisitions, you have to take all that into consideration, because the more money you either borrow or raise, you are going to lose on cash flow. So, debt's always cheaper than equity for sure. But if you're paying some sort of preferred rate of return or anything like that, you have to understand that if you spend too much at the property, then your rents aren't commensurate with how much you're spending. Then you aren't going to be able to meet the goals of your investor. Or yourself for that matter. But again, it all depends on how long you plan on holding the asset, what your strategy is with the asset. But yeah, I mean, like you said, all the bread and butter is obviously looking at income, expenses, and things like that. But I always tend to throw in, okay, what's it going to cost me to clean it up and to make sure the maintenance bills don't get out of control.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, sometimes it's about finding the right balance, right? Because a lot of things that we buy need, extensive amount of work as well. And it's exactly what you said. You don't want to put too much into the building and absolutely destroy the performance. But finding the right balance between, okay, what is this, a 5-year hold? Is it a 10-year hold? Is it a 20-year hold? And if it's 20-year hold, if it's for the long term, then maybe it makes a lot more sense to, put more money into the building up front. And mitigate some of those costs down the road, right? If you have a brand new plumbing system today, but if it's a 5-year hold and it's a quick turnaround, then you put less money into the building and and turn it over really quickly. But for us, it's also kind of deferring some of those expenses as well. And this gets a little bit more complex, but when you start thinking about the upfront cost are capitalized and depreciated over several years, right? But if we can somehow defer some of them into when we are operating, now they are actually expensed in our current year. So for instance, let's say we are working on a property right now where we would love to put up a privacy fence and pave the backyard and do stuff like that. And though though it typically probably is a capital expense, we can, if we defer it, until next year, we can probably try to work that into more of an operating thing, than bulking it into that capital expense up front, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely does. And sometimes those are the things that, like you said, it gets a little more advanced when you start looking, especially when you're looking at your first properties. Needing to understand capital expenses and depreciation and how that all rolls out. When we did, this was an advanced strategy that we had used in our acquisition of our 28 units out in Southern Indiana in the Louisville market. We did a cost segregation study on a larger asset like that, which allowed us to just take the age of all the mechanicals and things like that and depreciate them, just really kind of take all the depreciation and push it to the very front of the ownership period, which then reduces your tax, the tax on your income rather over the first few years, which gives you better cash flow to be able to provide to your investors. Now, eventually, yes, you'll have to pay all that back when you do sell the building. But as far as cash flow is concerned, and when you're providing preferred rates of return, it certainly helps. It helps in the performance.
No, absolutely. So I think at the end of the day, deal analysis comes down to income and expenses.
Yeah,
I mean, that's really what it comes down to. There's a lot of more complex ways to look at it. There's a lot of this cash on cash return. There's a lot of different measures that investors use, cap rate. There are all types of, payback period. There are all types of investor performance measurements, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, it's, does your property perform on an income basis? Does your income exceed your expenses by a given amount?